The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Meemaw and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Hello, everyone. This is Mike. I'm putting this disclaimer up front just to let you all know we had some technical issues when recording this bout. You may hear some dropped audio. You may also hear some low audio. But we have gone through and repaired and salvaged what we could. We had a lot of fun recording this episode for everyone. We were really looking forward to it. But, of course, the gremlins had to show up and throw a wrench into our gears. Without further ado, here is Saving Private Ryan versus Das Boot.
Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
To the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 152 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Gabriel Fubar Rowald.
Guten Abend, meine Freundin. Wie geht es Ihnen?
Farfignugan.
Ja.
Ja. Second, filmmaker and owner of Arizona Ink Studios, Andrew Quiet in This Whorehouse, Zumwalt.
James Francis Ryan of Iowa? Yes, sir. Patton, Iowa. That's correct. What is this about?
Third, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Tom Betty Grable. Nice gams. Haggis.
Yeah, I spent some time on that Weezer ship. I was very disappointed by their music selection.
Fourth, writer, actor, and director, Kyle. I can't navigate on bananas. Fine.
I hereby bequeath my entire estate to Jürgen Prochnow to brood menacingly at my funeral. And that's a will and testament. So there you go, guys.
Very nice. Very nice.
Nobody tell my wife.
All right, let's poke the monkey. Find out what we're discussing.
Ladies and gentlemen, deep sea divers and front line fighters, welcome to the main event. Tonight, two war stories deal out the drama on land and sea. Which will survive the struggle and which will fall in the fighting? In the first quarter, from 1981, written by Wolfgang Peterson and Lothar G. Buckeye, directed by Wolfgang Peterson, story Klaus Winterman, Herbert the second corner from 1998, written by Robert Rodat, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Sizemore,
Matt Damon,
and Tom Hanks. Saving Private Ryan.
So, Saving Private Ryan has been on our list since we started this podcast over a decade ago. Most of the time it sits there with a question mark next to it. And other times someone adds a movie next to it. We all discuss it. And eventually that movie gets taken off of the list and leaves Saving Private Ryan sitting there with a question mark. I believe Das Boot stands a chance, in my opinion. It is a very well done film. It can hold up against Ryan, and it gives us a look on something that not a lot of us know and that we can learn from. So I'll get off my soapbox and I will hand it over to you guys. Let's start off with our first round, which is writing.
All right, so writing. One of the things I like to do when we talk about these movies is I kind of like to go in and look at the filmography of the people that worked on them. Robert Rodat, who wrote Saving Private Ryan, has a spotty track record with his writing. He wrote the story, what a lot of people consider the worst Marvel movie, which would be Thor: Dark World. He wrote The Patriot, which is Spielberg typically works with story and some others. There's just these obstacles that pop up. We should have done Saving Private Ryan for the obstacles that come up, and the goal and the finish line kind of constantly keeps changing in terms of the basic A to B plots are the ones that it's actually one of the things that actually helps carry it through the 2.5 hours, and it's credited with. So what do you guys think?
Well, one of the things I think that would be challenging in writing a movie like this, a war movie, where it's especially these two, where there's so much. Well, I guess I wouldn't say that there's a lot of action all the time in Das Boot, but I guess maybe if I really did my research, I would see if I could find these screenplays and see how that was written. Because I'm sure there are certain points that they have to hit for these characters in those scenes, but so much of it seems like it would be left up that it is silent. It's just facial on paper. And I find that fascinating. And I find that something that would be very difficult. And both of them, I think, did a great job of that.
So it's interesting you bring that up, Gabe, because I think these movies are, in a way, opposites of each other in that respect, where it may be written, soldiers storm the beach of Normandy, they're anxious, hoping not to be found, or wondering if they're going to sink, and then that idea, is because there are, and both these movies are, like Tom said, they're linear in that they go from A to B. They have a lot of theme, a human being undergoing these incredible, almost unimaginable stressors that are taking place, and maintaining your cool. And we see in both movies characters lose their cool, and that's something that I think is very typical in war movies. You interactions, very private moments between people. A lot of Das Boot's gravitas that it brings to the screen is done through the acting and the directing, and not so much the writing. The actual story of them surviving and sort of the narrative, sort of irony at the end. Remember that this is not coming from the Hollywood film system, right? Where someone's telling them, you have to leave room for a sequel, you have to have an upbeat ending, people have to leave feeling happy. Like, that's not the way. and the plot is just them walking from A to B, B to C, C to D. What they're going through, what they're talking about, their experiences in war, their experiences with each other, that's the story of Saving Private Ryan, right? And plays on that camaraderie. And I like that both movies kind of take an unflinching look at completely disagreeing with other people's decisions, senior leadership's decisions. They're very much portrayed as like thinking, feeling. It kind of opened my eyes to the fact, like we may have been on different sides of the war, but they're still human beings. They care about their comrades. They care about the people they have at home.
And I know that traditionally this genre goes with more comedic movies, but I could almost see Saving Private Ryan be more of a buddy film because of that aspect that you talked about, Kyle, is that it's that group of people, in this case, 4 or 5 people in their journey through the story. And I think that is probably the easiest part of the writing. That part is where you can actually write your dialogue. You can build your characters. You can build out your struggle between the group. Dialogue that is building this why I want to watch, A to B and see what's going to happen in C and what's going to happen in D, and then you have those hits, so that way you could do your blocking. So you end up with a writer that is doing these dramatic sequences with action and explosions and working with pyrotechnics and visual effect. We're going to get this dialogue so it makes sense. How are we going to push the characters forward when they're moving? And in a large action scene like that, I don't know if you could specifically write down, okay, and then there's this with Das Boot. Yeah. I would say that the writing, it's hard. You don't have a lot of dialogue. We've talked about this before, bases, especially with Das Boot. So,
of dialogue it was in like the first 10, 15 minutes. And I didn't remember that. And that really, I don't know what you guys were saying about not a lot of dialogue. Show, don't tell, right? You don't have to have them.
After that, a lot of that dialogue seems like what I would call kind of functional.
Yes.
Dialogue.
Yes.
It's not the kind of dialogue that's like necessarily building characters or anything. It's like, get down, go over there, hurry up,
right.
That kind of stuff. There, it's just like just functional dialogue. But then when you get to the dialogue, the actual dialogue where these characters are interacting with each other and revealing themselves to each other, then it becomes really
meaningful.
Yeah,
it makes it more meaningful. Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
To answer Tom's question, I believe it was about Robert Rodat. Robert Rodat's script was bought by producer Mark Gordon, who liked the story but only accepted the final names is the most prominent. So that's how it got to Steven Spielberg. Mark Gordon gave it to Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks gave it to Steve. Tom.
Oh, screenplay. I'm going to have to go Saving Private Ryan.
Okay. And Andrew.
I am also going to go with Saving Private Ryan.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm marking the scoreboard. All right, now for the trivia. Loosely based on the real-life case of the Nyland and Sullivan brothers. The Sullivan brothers, by the way, are from Iowa, Waterloo. Gunther Bach, man. Starting off
nice job.
tonight, thanks of experience on several U-boat trips he recorded his time on. Submarine U-96.
That's
hey,
true.
Write what you know, so I'm going to put a writer in this.
With typewriters.
Yeah.
Very good point. All right.
I thought it was
Tom
funny.
Hanks would never tell anyone to leave a typewriter.
Exactly.
The scooter. God, I can't think of the name of the movie, but like his Twitter account, like every day he would just post a picture of a different typewriter. And it's a good story, Mike, but I just
doesn't he collect them?
Yes,
he does.
He collects them and he like restores them too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
fault. I am not well versed in German cinema. One of the main actors in that movie is the best-selling German they're doing. There is some very questionable moments where I think the acting falls apart. Reactions to certain things and the way people behave, I think, are borderline cartoonish and silly at points. It's just, of course, my opinion. And I think that does the movie a bit of a disservice. I think what hurts the movie a lot is that the characters are stuck doing one of just a handful of things over and over and over again. And it can be hard for them to flex their range. I think Jurgen Prochnow gets a bit more to do, and he's good at that. But I think they all kind of feel a bit samey, with the exception of like the waiting impatiently really well. There's way too much brooding in Das Boot. I understand it's a very dark movie. A lot of the screen time is eaten up with people staring or rubbing their chin, which I understand conveys an emotion, but I feel like it happens far too much. The director's cut of Das Boot, which I know all the Germans have met. Is that all they do is stare? It's just
that's all we do. Yes.
Okay. This is just, again, my opinion from watching the film, not knowing anything about war, no matter what trouble befalls them. Saving Private Ryan, I think, does a slightly better job at upping the stakes on the actors as you see them drop over time and not all in one big group, right? So that's a little bit of writing and a little bit of directing for sure. But Saving Private Ryan is hard for me to talk about on an acting scale because I feel like pound for pound, if you just exported the names into a spreadsheet, Saving Private Ryan may have the best cast in a movie that maybe has ever been made. Like there are more A-tier actors I forgot were in Saving Private Ryan than I remembered were in Saving Private Ryan. Like it's
as
the
a
cast
fan of
list is
Scott
insane.
Pilgrim, as a fan of Scott Pilgrim, I have to disagree.
You know what? I'll get you absolutely you're right to call me out on that. That movie is insane, is insanely casted. But like you're talking about,
what was it? I didn't catch it.
Scott Pilgrim.
Oh,
has insane cat. One of the most underrated movies of the last 20 years.
I love
for
that
sure.
movie.
But yeah, the acting in Saving Private Ryan is superb. Tom Hanks, I can't think of many bad. I mean, we watched Money Pit. I think that maybe is the worst Tom Hanks I've ever seen, and that is still better than many, many actors. But this is Academy Award nominated Tom Hanks, and for a reason. And he lost to Roberto Benigni, which we can talk about that later. But he's incredible. He's incredible in this movie. What?
We might have to do a whole category just on
about the 99 Oscars.
The Oscars, Oscars
that year. All right.
Oh my God.
So,
yeah, I have some complaints.
I'll stop running on at the mouth. Saving Private Ryan is superbly acted. I think, for my money, it has the most effective and disturbing death scene in any movie I've ever seen. That is when Giovanna Ribisi gets shot trying to take the machine gun nest. I forgot how hard that was to watch, and it's one of the reasons I don't watch the movie. It is disturbing. I mean, but obviously it's meant to be, right, to convey emotion. But it's hard to watch, and that is 100% credit to his incredible acting. Yeah, I mean, it's a who's who of Hollywood actors, and they're almost all bringing their A game. Like, it's an incredibly acted movie.
You forgot Vin Diesel. First of all.
Like I said, you forget A-list actors who were in that movie. Like, I think Fisher Stevens may be in that movie. I swear to God, I saw a guy who looked like Fisher Stevens.
Yeah.
So I the only thing I want to disagree with most of what you said is the fact that the worst death scene in that entire movie, I feel, is when they're actually when the German and the U.S. soldier, and they're upstairs and they're fighting hand-to-hand combat, and he ends up pulling the knife, and he fights him for quite a while until you can just see the exhaustion, and he just overpowers him, and it's that slow moment when, what do you do? And if you put yourself and they've done a good job of building these characters and making you feel something for all of these actors, because you have this moment where you see the one German soldier and you're like, that's the dude from before. And you now have this overarching sense of anger and fear, and it all kind of builds up to that moment. And then he's laying on top of him and he's slowly pushing the knife into him, and all he says is shh, shh. That, I'm sorry, but I feel like that death scene is one of the most just traumatizing, I guess is maybe a good word for it, but that is such an intense moment and so hard to watch, because they have done such a good job of you attaching to, and I would say, both sides of those characters, because you feel somewhat for the German. They're following orders, they're doing their thing, but this was the guy from before that you really felt maybe he does turn a corner. Maybe there is something different. And then you get to that point and you're like, holy crap. And that scene is just so well acted. And then I can never remember the reporter's the reporter's name. Upham? Upham, when he's sitting on the stairs and he's holding all the ammo, crying, and the German walks by and just pretty much ignores him. That scene, it gets me every time. That is such a tough scene to watch, because you put yourself. I could go on and on about that scene. The Das Boot, Das Boot. Sorry, there are moments when Johann, for instance, when he goes nuts. I don't know what happened there. Like, all of a sudden, like, I actually backed the movie up because he was fine. He was doing stuff. And then all of a sudden, the next scene, he's like, la, 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 crazy, man. And I was like, what just happened? And then they like take him to the front of the boat and they just kind of like, nah, he's gone. It's cool. And then he's fine now. He came back. He's worried about a court martial. That I get. Again, I agree, Kyle. They're building these characters of where they can get pushed to the limit, and I'm sure people went crazy or just lost their maniac minds, and they're stuck in a tube underneath water, and it's not like it is today with submarines. And I get it, but that scene seems so bizarre to me. Like, I don't know if it just didn't flow. I don't know. It just that moment was very odd. I would have.
If I can interject real quick, sorry. They actually do a push in on him while the depth charges are going, and he is like hanging on, and you can see him fighting to try and keep it together. Yep. And then that next scene is he breaks.
Yeah, I guess
he finally loses his nerve, and I just want to say this should have gone back to writing. It could be given to directing, but both of these movies show the horribleness of war, and the actors that portrayed these PTSD moments, like, I mean, that the losing of the nerves with Johann, and then Tom Hanks's twitching that he has with his hand. I mean, that just shows PTSD, like, of what they've seen, what they've dealt with, and how the human body tries to, at all costs, run away from anything that's happening, right?
And I want to be clear. I don't disapprove of showing the mind loss, because again, I'm not entirely sure how many people could hold it. I mean, he even says right after that he's done 9 tours, and being on a submarine, especially during that time, I can't even imagine that it's any better today. I'm assuming that you would have some of those moments. I mean, you're in a tube out of metal that's underneath the water withstanding pressure. I can totally see people completely losing themselves.
I would.
And I don't necessarily 100% pose it to the actor, because throughout the entire section where he's like in engineering and he's fixing the engine, and they even have him pull out the engine cup so he can listen to the firing pistons. I was like, he was one of my top characters that I really liked. It's just that, I don't know, there was something weird, and maybe you're right. Maybe this goes to the director and the way that was held and that scene was directed. I don't know, but that's only one thing that really bothered me. I mean, because like the captain, I freaking loved him. There are moments when he says things and he does these twitches, like isms maybe is a better word, that are just hilarious, especially when he's talking to the lieutenant, and the way that when they eat and just his facial expressions, man, that's gold. To find someone as an actor that can pull stuff off like that without saying a word, and you know exactly what he's thinking, that's talent. And that I appreciate it, because I feel like he was telling his character's story without saying any dialogue at all. And that takes an accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I wanted to point out about Das Boot is that the acting is subtle and understated. And a lot of it has to do with simple facial expressions and those kinds of things. And, and sometimes those facial expressions were kind of counter to what they were saying too. You could tell he was trying to be tough. He was trying to be captain, but sometimes you could tell that he was struggling with that, just based on his facial expressions. And so I think the difference between the two is that a lot of the acting in Das Boot is understated and subtle, and a lot. The more intimate moments in Saving Private Ryan are the same, but there's just a lot. There's a lot of overt action in Saving Private Ryan, so it's very different in that respect.
Okay, I need to get in here. And I was the one advocating for shorter rounds, and
Yes, you were.
I know, but you know what? You're not going to begrudge me, because I'm going to talk up one of your favorites.
Go ahead.
So I'll be honest. I saw Saving Private Ryan in the theater when it came out 25 years ago, and I have not watched it since, because I know it wasn't anything I was really excited about revisiting. There were lots of other war movies I wanted to see that I'm sure will come up in recommendations, but watching it this time in 2023, I think the performance that struck me the most out of both these movies was Tom Sizemore. I think he had kind of a tragic life, and admittedly a lot of it was self-inflicted. And I wonder if when Saving Private Ryan came out, if Hollywood started to wonder that they had been misusing Tom Sizemore, that he had a lot more talent than he was given credit for. But then if you look at his films after Saving Private Ryan, he just kind of, they kind of kept giving him the same kind of stuff. What was one of them? Black Hawk Down was one example. But Tom Sizemore did just an absolute amazing job. And I think he's one of the best co-stars in terms of, because I think when you guys have talked about this possibly being like almost like a buddy movie, that Tom Sizemore and Tom Hanks are an incredible duo. And granted, Tom Hanks is a great duo with anybody. That's just one of the things that makes him such a great actor, is that he's got that instant chemistry with whoever he works with. But I don't know. Tom Sizemore has so much range in this movie, and it just kind of came at me from left field, and I absolutely loved it. And I don't know if we owe him an apology or anything, but I certainly think that had things gone differently, he definitely could have been one of the greats.
I would say the scene specifically when after they actually stormed the machine gun nest, and he basically is like, get back in line. And that whole moment when he's pointing the gun at him and telling him, you know, hey, you've overstepped your line. Get back in line with the commander. If you want to leave, I'm going to shoot you. That whole sequence with him is incredible.
I'm going to shoot you because I don't like you.
And he's like, I'm just going to shoot you because I don't like you. And but that
him and Edwards,
that the calm from Tom Hanks, and then it sort of reminds you of that, you know, the big dog and the little dog, and the little dog knows that everyone respects him and he doesn't need to do anything, and then you have the big dog that's right there behind him, you know, backing the officer regardless of the command, and he knows. And I think that draws into that, like you said, the buddy kind of feel to those two characters. But that scene is scene sold me on him 100%.
Yeah, and
I
there's
love
also,
that scene.
and a lot of war movies do this, where the absurdity of war, where it's so tense that you just can't help but laugh. But when he gets shot the first time, and just he just kind of like
his reaction.
He turns around and
it's wearing like almost like he hit his thumb with a hammer in his garage. Like just how pissed off he is. He's come this far and he finally got shot of fucking something.
He just
stupid
seems
like that.
so inconvenienced by being shot.
Yes.
He's so
like,
oh, this is such a pain in my ass. I have to deal with this now. Yeah, you're amen,
all right.
Tom.
Thank you for letting me get that in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
because he turns around and throws his gun at him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's so mad. He's like,
I mean, he plays a great non-commissioned officer, right? He's the sergeant. And like sergeants, a lot of people will tell you sergeants are what make the Army work. When you have those experienced non-commissioned officers keeping your troops in line and getting things done, like he is just the embodiment of a sergeant. I mean, absolutely. I thought he was great.
Yeah.
And 10 seconds. I just want to say these leaders in these movies are leaders that are believable. People would follow them.
Mm-hmm.
You would follow the captain. You would follow the chief.
Yeah.
You would follow the sergeant. You would follow, you would follow these people.
100%.
And they do an amazing job at portraying that.
They do. Absolutely. Ted Danson showing up.
Yeah.
Like as the airborne. I'm like,
looking
is that
tall and like imposing.
Yeah. I'm like, holy shit.
Crazy.
Like he should have been in more war films. Like he makes a good soldier. And I absolutely love seeing Dennis Farina. Totally forgot he was in it. And Paul Giamatti.
Paul Giamatti. Yeah.
Where was Paul Giamatti in it?
He
was what? Are you kidding?
He's part of the
He's leader of one of the troops.
No, I'm not kidding.
He had a broken ankle or a sprained ankle when it's
raining. And they knock down that.
He knocks down the wall.
Reveals
all the Germans.
And knocks down the wall, and then all the Germans are there in this standoff.
Hey, 7 hours of movies and last 23. Give me a break. All right.
I'm telling you, they're A-list actors in parts that are just a few minutes long and Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, because when Spielberg calls, you don't say no.
Exactly.
Right, you don't. Right. You fly wherever and you do it.
You're like, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yep. That's all you do.
What's my part? I'm in there for 5 seconds. I'm in.
You got it.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think Vin Diesel was paid like $100,000 for his role.
That's insane.
Yeah. Absolutely crazy. Andrew, did you say that the German that stabs Private Mellish is the one that they let go?
It's the same guy.
No, it's not. That is a Waffen SS soldier, and the one
did
that
I
they
make
let.
A mistake?
No,
he's at the end, isn't he?
Yeah, he does show up at the end.
Steamboat, right.
He plays a very important role.
Which is the
Steamboat
character's
Willie.
name. Steamboat Willie shows up at the end and is the one that shoots Tom Tom Sizemore. No, he shoots
No.
Tom Hanks, but he
He
also
shoots Tom Hanks
He also shoots someone else too. But
because they look at him and they
Yes.
recognize him,
Yes.
and there's that moment. That's right. It is a
Yeah, and
different
at the
guy. You
end,
are correct.
he says up 'em
yes.
at the very end, and then up 'em.
But
Doesn't
it's
matter.
funny you said that because I thought the same thing before rewatching the film. I'm like, oh yeah, because this is the guy that comes back and stabs the one guy. Nope, it wasn't. I had to look it up. That's the only reason I know. All right, let's put it
Good
to
call.
a vote. Kyle.
No shade to Das Boot. Saving Private Ryan is superbly acted.
Okay.
That's my vote.
All right, Gabe.
Yeah. How can you not go with Saving Private Ryan?
All right, Andrew
Saving Private Ryan.
and Tom.
You're Saving Private Ryan. I can't not.
Okay. To simulate the storm in the Atlantic in Das Boot, a model of the tower was splashed with water from a large tank. Jan Feder lost his grip on the railing and was washed off the model, breaking a few ribs in the fall. One of the other actors instantly shouted, "Man overboard." Wolfgang Petersen, not realizing it was an accident, enthusiastically yelled, Good idea, Jan. We'll do that one more time." Peterson kept the scene and rewrote Feder's part so that his character spent part of the movie in bed. The actor, who had a concussion, was brought back and forth from the hospital every day. The painful expression on his face is real. The scene, which features him bedridden, is in the uncut edition. All the principal actors of Saving Private Ryan, except for Matt Damon, underwent several days of grueling army training. Damon was spared so the other actors would resent him and would convey that feeling in their performances. The boot camp involved camping in soaking wet conditions, only being allowed to call each other by their characters' names, and boot camp supervisor Dale Dye referring to them all as turds. And I believe Dale Dye, part of his story is what makes up Band of Brothers. All right, let's move on to our third round, directing.
Wow, this is going to be a hard round to judge as well because I think these are both really great directors. But the one thing I wanted to mention, I didn't know if it made sense to mention it in acting or in directing, is that it seems like both of these directors wanted to torture and like just really give hell to their actors. I mean, think about all these scenes in Das Boot where they're the water's leaking and they're spraying water in their face and they're just like soaked, and it's like I don't know, I don't know how many times they had to redo those scenes. I don't know what Wolfgang Petersen's approach is. Is he a one take kind of guy, or is he like, let's do it 20 times to get it just right? And it's like, I just think, oh my God, these poor guys had to put up with this. And we're watching a 3.5 hour cut of this movie, and I'm thinking, well, anytime I've ever made a movie, I've had 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much footage. These guys had to put up with this for hours. How do they do it? And then, like Mike just mentioned in the trivia, for Saving Private Ryan, they went through like basic training basically for this movie, and just think of all these really tough physical scenes that they had to go through with the explosions and the debris and I just can't imagine it. And I feel like these directors must really not like actors because, man, they are torturing them. But, man, to a great result, too. It really paid off. It made both of them seem very very believable and realistic. And we have to thank both the directors and the actors for that, I guess. But I'd love to hear about your guys' thoughts on these directors. These are two great directors. It's going to be a really hard decision on this one.
It's for me. It's a lot of times people, when they think about cinematography, there's always the just the wide, the lighting is perfect, and wide landscapes and beautiful images. I think what I love about Das Boot is it takes the cinematographer to, and Wolfgang Peterson too, but it took him to turn that on its head and remind you that sometimes cinematography it's not looking out at a beautiful mountaintop or the perfect lighting on a woman's face. Sometimes it's dirty and it's gritty, and people who have claustrophobia are going to have a problem watching this movie because you did your job right and you used the right lenses. And I don't know if the cinematographer was concussed by any of the takes in Das Boot. I cannot imagine running through that submarine, with a handheld Airflex. I mean, even as small as they are, it's still, was it 1980? You're still, you still have to like duck into these portals and stuff, and it's incredible. I think
it really is.
The camera work at Das Boot. If this movie came out now, it wouldn't be as impressive because you could always work with composites and stuff. But I think that the modeling and the special effects and the underwater shots, it holds up so well. And obviously there's some some background plate work that's a little iffy, but I don't know. I don't want to give the directing award to somebody just because of the cinematography, but there's so many times where I'm looking at it and like, I don't even know how they did it. And there's obviously tons of those scenes in Saving Private Ryan too. And Spielberg is a master of taking the audience and putting them in the scene and feeling it. So I don't know, this will be a pretty tough one, but as someone who doesn't like tall places, Das Boot or Das Boot, as we're calling it, it would be, I don't know, it affected me. It was a tough watch.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, having the cinematographer deliver the claustrophobicness of, is that a word? Claustrophobicness?
It is now.
Of a submarine and being down in that moment, so you felt like you were on the boat with everybody. And when there's a couple of shots where all of them are like huddled together trying to eat, and there's like 4 people on a bed, there's like 6 people sitting down trying to eat, 2 other people are shaving, like that entire scene, to work that out, plus put the camera in there, plus make it you feel like you're sitting there with them. And that's not just the director doing that. That is also your cinematographer getting in there and feeling that. And I can't even imagine. I'm sure there's probably a lot of stuff about the sets and how they actually got everything in there, because, there's stuff that was small and stuff, but it was the 80s. I mean, this was film. This was massive equipment compared to what we have today. And to get all that in there and still get that feeling, that's some artistry involved. Steven Spielberg in Saving Private Ryan, I know I've seen a lot of behind the scenes footage for Saving Private Ryan. I've seen a lot of interviews with Steven Spielberg, and they made choices for cameras. They made choices for how they wanted to shoot things, and especially the beach, and how they wanted it to be grittier. They wanted it to be totally handheld and jittery and almost just incoherent, to once again make you feel like you were sitting on the front line with these characters and making you feel like you were there. And they have such eye for doing that kind of thing. And that is not just, the director saying, yeah, we want to shoot this war scene. This is going to be the storming of Normandy. Yeah, you guys got to, you guys will figure, like, the cinematographer coming in and being like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to follow this, and making that moment so you felt like you were there. That, again, is such a talent and such magic that they pulled off. In fact, there were, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were, when Saving Private Ryan first came out in the theaters, they had plenty of war veterans who had actually gone to the film, leaving and feeling like having PTSD and feeling like they were back in World War II, because it was so realistic and so powerful that they thought that it just brought back memories almost instantly, because it was so well done. And that is a journey and a success all at the same time. And that is so hard. I mean, that's what we want as a filmmaker, right? As a filmmaker, you want to make people feel something. You want to get people so in touch with the story that you're telling and the moments that you're showing. And to be able to do that is mastery across the entire cast and crew on both films. Because, man, I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure there were submarine people that could watch that movie, especially in the 80s, and be like, holy crap, this was like I was being on a boat again.
Yeah. We talk about deciding how the movie looks and how it's shot and portrayed. Very often a conversation between a lot of people, but the director and the cinematographer are very involved in that. I think you could give a cinematography Oscar to Saving Private Ryan just for the storming the beach scene. I mean, it's absolute bedlam. It's mayhem. It's one of the most affecting scenes I can remember in any war movie I've ever seen. It's incredible. And the combat is that way in Saving Private Ryan. It's visceral in a way that a lot of movies shy away from. It's a surprisingly beautiful movie in places, Saving Private Ryan. One of the real, I guess, not oxymoronic isn't what I'm thinking of, but the sort of beauty in the face of war is when they're walking through that field of wildflowers and they spot the nest. You're kind of like, wow, it's like a pop of color in this. And you're like, there is still like beauty in all of this grittiness. It's just an incredibly well shot, Saving Private Ryan. I mean, obviously, I think there are scenes in Saving Private Ryan that bug me a bit. I think they're kind of like, I don't know if you'd call them a little hokey. I don't really know. So let me preface by saying I really like Saving Private Ryan. I think it's a great film. I don't know how much I like the narrative structure of starting with a flashback, or starting in the present and flashing back, telling the story of the war, and then coming to the end. I'm usually not a huge fan of that bookend style. I think the movie could have been just as effective told another way, but I understand it. Like, I get the point of it. But Das Boot, so this reminds me of when we talked about Snowpiercer and the other train movie we did, Bullet Train, where a director and a cinematographer go, okay, this is our setting. How do we make the most of how it feels, right? We talked in those movies about how they used the idea of trains to their maximum effect. Das Boot is that with a submarine, 40 years earlier, where that feeling of claustrophobia, isolation, darkness, quiet, silence is pervasive throughout the movie. And it is incredibly effective for setting the tone. The loud explosions, the rocking, like the water that continues to spray them. I agree with you, Gabe. I think Wolfgang Peterson hates his principal actors. Cannot imagine how many lungfuls of water, earfuls of water up the nose, like how often these guys must have had to deal with that constantly. That would have been miserable. And I'm not saying shooting Saving Private Ryan would have been a cakewalk at all. I'm sure it sucked. But there's something about being cold and wet for hours and hours and hours that would just make a miserable experience. just miserable. But yeah, they got anybody to show up after a few weeks of shooting that is a miracle. I would have been like, this isn't the life for me. But yeah, incredible the shots they get in the submarine, the way it feels so tight, as if there's no conceivable room for a camera. And I think that's what makes it feel so present for you and so claustrophobic. Is it's hard for me to imagine, knowing when the movie was made, how they shot it that way. That's such an impressive feat. Saving Private Ryan, everything is much more open, right? And it's beautifully shot and masterfully done. But Das Boot is a feat. It's like a technical marvel to feel that way, to make that boat look and feel that way, to shoot it that way, and to get all the shots they got with all the constant running and scrambling and motion and lights. And I mean, it's just really incredible. Really, really incredible.
I want to, I guess we talked a little bit about how they sent the actors to boot camp and such in the last round. But, you say the spraying and being cold and tired and wet for long periods of time. I mean, it puts that person in that character. It connects them to maybe that character in a better way. And that was maybe an on-set version of the boot camp to build them into that I am miserable. Does that actually get portrayed across the screen? Does the director now get a better performance from that actor because they're actually conceivably living the exact thing you are, in a sense, playing make-believe to get this movie, and you're building that. And so maybe that's a good thing. I would hope they would know that they're getting signed on for that, but I would think that would be part of it, to get you to have those miserable moments, to have those men looking like they did, and you could just see the anguish in them. And maybe some of it wasn't just pure acting. Maybe it was just because they were miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be in Munich anytime soon, but the Bavaria Film Studios, where they shot this, they still have the submarine, and you can pay $22 and go on the sets of Neverending Story and Das Boot and like walk around the submarine and stuff. If I'm ever near Munich, I'm going to stop in. 'Cause I got to see. I just want to see it for myself in real life and just see how cramped it was. And I don't know. If it's not, then it'll ruin the movie.
I'd take that tour.
Yeah.
$22. That's awesome.
Yeah.
100%.
And I also think about a quote from Matt Damon doing one of the Jason Bourne movies. They had a device where a driver would drive the car. It would look like the actor was driving, but there was actually a driver on top of the car. And he referred to it as the NAR, the no acting required. And because it seemed very real, it was all like all those facial expressions and everything were very, very real, and that's what it would be. Well, for both of these movies, really, like not a lot of acting required. It's actually just happening to you, and this is your reaction. So yeah, it's pretty incredible.
You guys mentioned about looks of the films. I was reading about the cinematography on Ryan, and the cinematographer, instead of shooting the scenes, the normal shutter speed for a camera is 180 degrees. And he had it offset to, I think it was 80 or 90 degrees, to give it a different kind of look, to go along with the saturation that they used.
And it makes it uncomfortable.
Yes.
It makes the viewing uncomfortable and almost jittery.
But my question is, because I couldn't find it, is what lens, how fast of a lens did they shoot Das Boot in? Because all that was practicals. Like throughout the ship, those are, they're just using brighter practicals in the bulbs and stuff. So, I mean, from what I saw. Now, they could have had lights hidden somewhere, but most of it looked like they were using the practicals built into that model of the ship. So I would be curious to find out how fast of a lens that was, what the f-stop was of that lens. And I'm guessing they were Zeiss. It was Zeiss glass, but now I'm getting very nerdy.
It is German.
Yes, it is German.
They are German.
That's a good assumption, Mike. Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I watch Germans use German lenses.
I watch a lot of Matlock, so let's put it to a vote. Gabe.
Well, and one last thing I wanted to say was the logistics of creating either of these movies, just incredible. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine being a director and trying to coordinate all this stuff. I have to, they're both really well done. This is a really hard category, but I'm going with Saving Private Ryan.
All right. Andrew.
I think I'm going to go with Saving Private Ryan. It's a pretty on the fence list.
Tom.
I gotta give it to Das Boot. Is that the pronunciation we're going with?
Jeez.
Das Boot.
If you're not clearing your throat, you're not saying it right.
Sorry to any of our German listeners.
Tut mir leid.
I forgive myself, but only partially. Yeah, I give it to Das Boot, whatever.
Okay, Kyle.
I'm sorry, but hang on, I'm sorry. Before Kyle votes, because this might influence him, Das Boot did it for $35 million. That's why I'm voting for it. They did a hell of a lot with a much smaller budget and a lot less technology. There. I just want to say that.
What's the inflation? What's the inflation?
81.35. All right, Kyle, go ahead and vote, and I'll look it up.
All right. Yeah, Tom knows where to get me in the pocketbook, so he has swayed me. I will vote for The Shoe. Or Das Boot. Sorry.
It's $110 million. This is probably pretty close to their budget.
No, I think Private Ryan, $110 million was the cost for shooting the Omaha Beach scene alone.
Or Tom Hanks' salary.
No,
it says $70 million for the budget.
$70 million. The budget's only $70 million. That
what?
Is
really?
Crazy.
Oh,
yeah. Don't you remember? Don't you remember at this time though? Remember, people were like, when budget started breaking $100 million, it was a big deal, and it was after this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And now it's 300 million. So that's crazy.
Steven Spielberg made incredible decisions on the fly, putting the camera up to each scene and determining the direction from there. He wanted his shots to feel unpredictable, just like a real firefight. And he actually operated the camera for a lot of the Omaha scene. When the camera shakes during explosions, Spielberg used drills attached to the side of the camera, which were turned on when required. While shooting with this effect, the crew's photographer let Spielberg know that there was a shaker lens for cameras. Spielberg said in an interview that he had thought he had invented a great new technique.
Wah, wah. Where's your horn?
To get one particular interior shot, a section of the model's wall was removed during Das Boot. However, Wolfgang Petersen and cinematographer Joost Volcano felt that it detracted from the film's overall authenticity, and from then on only filmed the interior from within the confines of the boat. Volcano, the DP, explains the camera has to be squeezed into a tight space and be limited in space, just like the people who are in there. The camera is not allowed to leave that space at any point. It must physically stay there. Speaking to Crave Online, Wolfgang Petersen explains, "We thought in the beginning we might kill ourselves after a few weeks because it's just such a small place. But after all, we shot in sequence. The actors got more and more really into their part. So they actually grew to, well, like you guys were saying, after doing all that, it makes you feel immersed into the character.
So I'm curious, did they actually like span it out as far as they could to make sure that their beards would actually grow? Because that was one thing I noticed.
Yes,
that
I
thought was a nice touch.
They were told that they had to grow beards. So they actually, if I remember reading the trivia, and I think it just said that, but and maybe it didn't because I've read a lot of trivia today. They shot in sequence. So the whole movie was shot from beginning to end, just like that. And for those of you that don't know, a lot of times movies are shot out of sequence.
A lot of times.
Oh, well, most of the time. There's the very rare occasion that they're shot in sequence.
Yeah, and I can very much see like, well, okay, they're like, okay, you guys need to be bearded and scruffy, for this, and then at the end they shave them and clean them up and go back and film the beginning.
And that's what I was thinking too. I was like, oh, maybe they shot everything with them with beards and da-da-da. But yeah, I had the same thought. But I've read more than one source that has stated that they shot in sequence.
Well, I read too that the cast was required to stay out of. They had to stay indoors through all the shooting.
Yes, they could not go outside.
So that they were more
no
pale.
sun.
Yeah, sunlight.
No sun.
So that would so that then that's another point for filming in sequence. So.
All right, that's crazy. Let's move on to our fourth and final round overall.
Yeah, that's a me. So we've talked a lot about stuff. I don't want to go too far into rehashing a lot of things because we could talk about war movies. I know Mike, and I'm not sure who anyone else, but we're really big into historical with the wars and doing a lot with veterans, and so I've heard a lot of cool stories. Traumatic stories, tragic stories, all in one. And we could talk about this kind of stuff for hours. We normally talk about music, and I know music a lot of times is pop culture references or rock songs or whatever fits the bill to make the emotional attachment. And I would say that Saving Private Ryan definitely has that kind of a soundtrack to it in places, but it's very notable that there's not music in a lot of both of these movies, and duly on purpose. Like, that would deter from that realistic, that immersion that you would get. And we can definitely hit more if, I know, Gabe, you really like to talk about some of the composers and stuff. What I wanted to really focus on that I don't think we a lot of times spend enough time talking about, and that is just the audio design in general. Saving Private Ryan, if you've never watched it in a theater or in a home surround sound system where you are able to be completely immersed, the sound design in that movie is extraordinary. The amount of times, especially during the opening, but through all of the battle scenes and even just in the downtime scenes, the amount of immersion that they went into, from bullets whizzing by you to, just the background sounds of people talking, where you hear the wind. And I know it sounds like these are really minuscule things, or they're small, especially things like the wind, or you hear like just in the faint distance, some gravel. Like, it makes that immersion so well that your brain gets into that moment. And it is so well done in Saving Private Ryan. And conversely, I'm going to say that Das Boot has a very similar feel. when the rivets start popping and they're compressing and you hear the creaks in surround sound, those creaks actually move around you, and then you hear a rivet behind you and it crosses in front of the screen. Like, the attention to detail to really put you in those moments is not just that person speaking or that person emoting. That sound that really brings you into there it was just incredible, really, in both movies. And so I have to give a shout out to both audio designers for both of these films, because it is truly exceptional to help with that immersion. So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is special effects. We talk about this sometimes, especially in heavier special effects movies. I would say that Das Boot, they obviously did miniatures. Like, they had to have done miniatures for a lot of the stuff. It's pretty obvious, at least now. I would be afraid. I think Tom was the one that said, what would happen if they were to make it now? It would be different. I would be afraid that they would do CG for a lot of stuff, and especially the underwater scenes or some of the shots when they're actually on the bridge and the wind and the waves and stuff. And yeah, there's some compositing things, but it is what it is at the time. I still felt that the miniature work they did was really well done, especially the underwater scenes, because underwater, regardless if you're shooting full size or little tiny ships, it's hard. And I thought they did a really nice job, especially for what they had, especially the depth charges. The depth charges look so well. Like, they looked really real. I'm actually really curious how they did those because I'm guessing they actually had some sort of an actual explosion, but the way they reacted to the water and the way that the actual wave happened, that was very well done. The biggest thing that gives away the miniatures is when he's looking through the periscope. Miniature water just doesn't look the same as real water. But other than that, I thought that part of the work and being able to merge those two things together, they did a fantastic job. And then, going over to Saving Private Ryan, the amount of work that goes into, especially when you have live pyrotechnics, when you have so much stuff going on. We've talked about this over and over tonight. When you have all of that going on and everything has to be planned, because it seems chaotic, but on set, all that stuff's planned. It has to be for the safety of the actors and the crew. You just have to have that stuff planned out. And to, find the correct guns, the correct look of the uniforms, to find all of those things and bring it all together, you have to give a shout out to the entire artistry of making sure that all that stuff sits in. The one thing we haven't mentioned that I always like to bring up is Saving Private Ryan, because it's the one thing that I feel actually brings down the movie to a personal level, and it's not just about the war, and that's Tom Hanks. Everywhere that he goes, he always picks up a handful of dirt and puts it into a container to take with him, and then marks all of them.
I thought that was Mike.
Is it Mike that
Tom
does it?
Sizemore.
Yeah,
Tom Sizemore. That's right. Those moments are something that people do even today. As they visit places, they'll pick up rocks or they'll pick up sand, or they bring a little momentum of, I touched this ground. And to see that played out in the film, even up until the end, I thought was one of those most human moments in the entire film, that I thought was an interesting way to bring out the humanity even in the midst of war, as we have said before. So,
well, it's also a great, it also showcases our whole show don't tell, because you get a history. You see they were in Italy. You see that they were in Africa.
See them without putting Italy, 1944,
Yes.
or France, or whatever on the
Yes.
screen. So yeah, it does a nice job with that. I also liked the idea that they, for the most part, didn't translate any of the German, to really get that sense that you were on, from the perspective of the characters that you were following. I could go on and on about a lot of the war stuff and the talk. So I talked a lot longer than I expected with my notes. So
you bring up one real good point. The whole German not translating it. There's actually the bunker. I believe it's when they're going against the radar bunker.
Yep.
It says speaking Czech because they were Czech soldiers. They were called East soldiers because the Czech was part of the Axis powers. They were so the East soldiers were like Polish soldiers, Czech soldiers, some Greek soldiers. Wherever the Reich had taken over, they would take volunteers and also force a lot of people to fight for them.
And most of those regiments for the Reich were secluded from the Germans because they were considered fodder and good, strong fighters, but there was not a reason to mix them in with the pure Germans.
That is correct.
Sorry, like I said, we could do this all night.
So
go, Tom.
Well, I just, like I said, I saw the Saving Private Ryan in the theater 25 years ago. And it's interesting that you had talked about sound design because it wasn't really anything that I was really very into movies and I was going to college for movies, and it wasn't anything that sound design wasn't really anything that was on my radar. But I distinctly remember, it's 25 years ago, so I remember a couple parts of the movie real distinctly. But one of them is when they're Spielberg showing the drops of the water kind of hitting, and there's a real faint sounds of bullets. And I remember sitting in the theater and just kind of turning to my wife and say, do you hear bullets? Are there bullets? And it was very immersive. And then he repeats that again later on when they're waiting at the bridge and they start to hear the German forces, coming in for the climactic scene. So, no, I agree. The sound design, that this is the movie that really put that in front of me as something to look and listen for in movies.
Yes, the sound design is incredibly important for both of these movies. I mean, just think about Das Boot and how much of it relied on what they could hear and what we were hearing. Just all the subtle sounds that we were hearing. The boats going overhead or those kinds of things. I mean, the sound design is incredibly important for both of these movies.
Because it Das Boot, sound is how you see, and that's that's how they were able to tell where the destroyers were and that kind of thing, and we got to experience that as as viewers to a certain degree, and just all the subtlety of those sounds and what does that sound mean, because all of a sudden sound has that sound has meaning. And but then, so I watched Das Boot first, and I had seen Saving Private Ryan before, but then I turned on Saving Private Ryan, and I'm like, oh my God, the sound in this movie is just amazing, just incredible, and it was so much different. But I still realized how important it was for Das Boot. And I just wanted to talk just really quick about the music. For Das Boot, when they go through, when they do those scenes where they're hauling ass and they're going really fast, and there's this really triumphant music. I felt like that kind of stood out a little bit to me,
and maybe not kind of like that.
I kind of didn't like it because it sounded a little bit too. Well, it sounded a little too 80s.
Oh, yeah, it definitely sounded 80s.
To me, as opposed to this is something that would have matched. In a lot of cases, not always, depending on how the movie's put together. In a lot of cases, I prefer if the music kind of matches the time period that it's in, and maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe that's not a fair assessment of it. But I felt like, okay, well, this is like 1940s, and the music kind of sounded 1980s at those times, and so I that kind of took me out of it a little bit. But I don't know. That's just me.
You'd hate the cut with Harold Faltmeyer doing all the sounds, and it sounds like Beverly Hills Cop when they're going fast.
It works then because it fits the time period. But, we're going to be talking about some of those later.
Two things I want to bring up. One, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I probably said it on half the episodes we've done. But that is tone. How does your movie feel from start to finish? Does it feel consistent the entire way through if that's what you're trying to get across, right? If you want to change tone, that's fine. Some great movies do it. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite examples of a movie that stops on a dime and turns from a very fun, lighthearted movie to an incredibly real movie about people who fear for their lives. I think it's perfectly done in that movie. Both of these movies are great, straight through it, keeping that tone going. Das Boot, I want to give extra special credit to, and the only other movie I've seen be this effective this way is the remake of The Invisible Man, and that is how you can get away with having tension based on actors looking at nothing. They are staring up at the ceiling of a model. There is nothing really out there, right? But their reaction to it is what we're intrigued by. The new Invisible Man, I wanted to get an Oscar just for realizing that it probably saved them $5 million or more with all the shots of her staring at open doors, empty chairs, right? Because that's the fear, right? Is what you can't see, and they understood that and used it to their advantage. The exact same thing in Das Boot that they were great at. The fear is in what you can't see. You can only hear it. There's no way to know how far away there are, if you're about to be found, if you're about to die, and that's terrifying. War is horrible enough. We see it in all these war movies. Saving Private Ryan is no exception. But imagine not knowing if anyone knows where you are, right? If you're getting shot at in a war, you have a good idea that someone knows where you're at. In Das Boot, they could know where you're at and you don't know it. And at any second, just absolutely be ambushed, which has got to be such a difficult and nerve-wracking experience. And they get all the mileage they can out of that by having them, play that scenario where they are straining to listen. I think one of the best characters in the movie for that is, and the actor nailed it, was their radio op who listens to the sonar. He has such an intense look at his face, and he portrays this idea of listening for their lives. He is the first one who's going to know whether they're in trouble or not. And he is great at bringing that across to them. And you see how much the captain relies on him. That is their eyes there, right? And I think that's fascinating and should be pointed out how great that is that they realized that and used it to their full advantage. Because a lot of lesser filmmakers would let that slip away. It's an opportunity like that. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to talk poorly about these movies, other than I think Das Boot is overly long. Saving Private Ryan has a few scenes that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I really don't want to detract from it too much. They're very good. And yeah, war movies. I mean, a handful of us could sit around and talk about war movies all day, but yeah, these are two quintessential ones. And I'd never seen Das Boot before. It took me 3 viewings to watch it, and I had to rent it twice on Amazon because I let too much time lapse after I started it and kept watching it because it was so long. But great films.
I also found it interesting that they actually brought in Das Boot, they brought in Enigma. You see that a couple of times, which I thought was a nice touch. They talked about the invention of the sonar that the Americans had, those American pigs. So I thought that was nice little touches that they added to Dust Bowl as well. So
yeah, that was really interesting. It gave me a flashback. Like, didn't we just do a movie about this?
Yeah,
or we just did a show about this. Yeah.
Do you guys have anything else you would like to add to overall?
I have a real quick, funny Dust Boot story.
Sure.
I can keep it short. So back like 97, 98, when I'm dating my wife, I convinced her to watch Das Boot, and we watched the director's version, the big 208-minute version that we just watched. And it was riveting, and it was very tense, and we absolutely loved it. And it gets 5 minutes from the credits. We're down to the very end of the movie. We're through this frickin' slog. And she goes, fuck. And I looked at her and I said, what's wrong? She goes, pause it. I was like, there's 5 minutes left. What's wrong? And she goes, I don't know where. I don't know when. I must have been like 6 or 7 years old. And there was a movie on TV. And I just realized that I've seen the last 5 minutes of this fucking thing. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's over. And she's like, it's not over. Go ahead and hit play. I know what happens. And then, of course, everything goes to hell. And I'm like, wow, that sucks. three and a half hours. And you never left the dock.
Yep. I just want to say, like Tom said, Saving Private Ryan is a great film, but also it can be difficult to watch. I believe this was either my third or my fourth viewing for myself. It's heavy. I mean, it is a heavy film. And I remember not caring for Corporal Upham when I first saw the film. Like, I'm like, he's the reason they let that German go, and then he shows back up. Like, I disliked him a lot. And then after rewatching it this time, he's become closer to, I'm not saying my favorite character, but I realize what he's trying to do. He's trying to be a good person. He's trying to, hey, he's a prisoner. You can't shoot a prisoner. And then it comes back and bites all of them in the ass, literally. And then he just shoots him in cold blood. Like, there is absolutely no warm blood about that. It is shoot you in the face with a bazooka, cold blood type of thing. And it really hit me this time watching it again. I had seen, what's that?
He even says on the hill when they first capture him, he says, you can't shoot him. It's against the rules.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then I think it just speaks volumes for what people go through in war. And, being Das Boot being a film about the other guys, the bad guys, the Third Reich. And you realize that they're just as human as the people that we're rooting for on our side. They're just fighting a war. They're not. A lot of them are not buying into the bullshit that is flung their way, except for the one Mexican born kid that came back over to Germany.
And he's not seen war, right?
So youth, yeah.
You become so jaded, and that's what Das Boot's really good at showing, is how jaded you become.
And the more I read about history and the history of battles and history of certain wars, you realize that even there, I've brought it up once before, probably a couple times, but there's a book called Storm of Steel, and it's about a German World War I soldier and the absolute just humanity that he sees on his side, the carnage, and just how it can bring out the worst in people and it can bring out the best in people. And I think both of these films show that, and it shows the amount of stress that all those people, no matter what side they're on, what it does to the human experience.
I mean that's a good point, because you're watching Das Boot, and it's so easy to forget that they're Nazi, that it's
right.
You're just kind of cheering for humanity, like,
for them to
I hope
survive.
I hope they can get through this. I hope they can get through this Allied blockade where, it wouldn't, you normally wouldn't cheer for them, but it doesn't become like, when you're in that situation, suddenly the politics don't even play into it. It's just about survival.
Right. And it's just amazing to think about what some of these men and women had to live through and still, tell the tale. And those that didn't, that they still carry in their heads, watching them die in front of them, or carried off and then die later. It's just immense to think about that. But yeah, I think both of these movies are very well done, tell the story that needs to be told. And just one little last anecdote before we go to vote. Das Boot, I believe, premiered in the U.S. at the LA Film Festival. And when that opening text comes up, that 40,000 Kriegsmarines served during World War II, 30,000 of them were killed. People cheered at that. And it's because, it's an American audience. Like, yeah, we almost took them all out. But by the end of that screening, they applauded the movie. They actually stood and applauded the film. So, you went from the rah, rah, rah to, oh my God, they're just human. They're trying to survive. And actually stood and applauded the film. I believe it was a quote from Wolfgang Peterson where he talked about that. But all right, let's put it to.
Do we need to talk about the Oscars at all in reference to these movies? Do we need to get into that, or do we not?
Let's put it to a vote, and then you guys can let loose with your Oscars, because I've done so much trivia. We can do a little bit of the Oscar talk before I reveal the winner. So, okay. Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
Who you voting for?
I'm gonna go with Saving Private Ryan. I know I'm a clean sweep tonight, but
it's all right. Tom?
Yeah, I'd probably go Saving Private Ryan.
All right. Kyle?
Yeah, I didn't think this was going to be a matchup, really, because I just thought nothing could kind of touch Saving Private Ryan. Das Boot was really, really, really good. Very long, but a very good movie. Yeah, I have to give it to Saving Private Ryan, though.
Okay. And Gabe?
Saving Private Ryan.
All right. Okay, so we'll skip the little bit of trivia I had left, and the Oscars. What would you guys like to say about the Oscars in these films, besides that
Shakespeare
and
Love? Shakespeare in Love is a modern classic. It's the best movie of the last 40 years.
If you had switched out the words Saving Private Ryan, then you would be correct. Otherwise, that was one of the most infuriating decisions at the Oscars I've ever experienced. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, Shakespeare in Love
You really wanted to do this.
Yeah. I wanted to do this since then, because Shakespeare in Love is a great movie. But Saving Private Ryan is a masterpiece, and it's one of the only movies that I would ever refer to as an experience as opposed to a movie. It's so immersive. It's so emotional. It's so meaningful. And Shakespeare in Love was just kind of a fun thing about Shakespeare and kind of being, oh, hey, can a modern person write like Shakespeare? It just was not the same thing. And it was tragic. It was stolen from Saving Private Ryan. And I don't know why. I have no idea why.
Oh, Harvey Weinstein launched a massive campaign and marketed.
Yes.
And
well, that could be why.
That was the point. That was the point when I learned that the Oscars goes to the best marketed film that comes out towards the end of the year. Generally speaking.
This is true.
And at that point, I just kind of let it go, man. The Oscars can get it wrong half the time,
Yeah, and I think really kind of undermines your, the meaning. The Oscars kind of lose meaning at that point.
It does, but if you look at the Oscars, it's just a snapshot of where we are as a society. At that point, the Oscars could be purchased, and hopefully we're coming out of that a little bit. But at the same time, we've shifted a lot. If you kind of look back at the Oscars that have won Best Picture and Best Director, it's happening less and less than it did like back in the 40s when it used to happen all the time. And I think this was one of the years where they were like, well, we'll give Spielberg Best Director and then we'll give Shakespeare in Love Best Picture. And they split it. They do that a lot more than they used to, but it's... Yeah.
And, I don't know that they should go hand in hand. I mean, you feel like they would in most cases. And I'm thankful that they gave Spielberg Best Director for Saving Private Ryan. But I just, if you can't tell, there's like this emotional scar I have from that. I'm like, this is the best movie I think I've ever seen in my whole life. And they're not giving it Best Picture. Are you kidding?
Take heart that you are not the only person that was emotionally scarred by Harvey Weinstein.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I take part.
No! Don't you fucking sad trombone that. Give that asshole. Don't undermine that fucking cut. Fuck him.
Yeah, he is.
No, thank you for Pulp Fiction.
He's a human trash.
No, he did. He ruined a lot of things. People and the Oscars. So, and I feel I like to hope that we're coming around and things are getting better, but I don't know. Green Book won Best Picture, so what the fuck do I know?
There are moments in life where you have realizations that fundamentally change who you are. You, spoiler alert, kids, you learn there's not a Santa Claus, right? Or you learn sorry guys, that there's a day where you realize that your parents are just as dumb as you are. They're just older, usually. Well, I mean, they by definition have to be older, I suppose, unless they're your step-parents. And when your step-parents is younger than you. But anyways, yeah, you realize they're human, right? They're not some mystical creatures. And then also when you realize that life isn't fair and the best movie doesn't win the Oscar, the best actor doesn't win the Oscar. It's a popularity contest sometimes. Sometimes it's bought. Sometimes it's people get it for a movie they should have won it for 30 years ago, but they didn't get it, so they give it to them for another role. And it hurts because you feel like it should be a meritocracy, and it's just not, and that sucks. Yeah, I can't think of. Look, I've never seen Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni. Perhaps it's a classic, but I can't imagine. It's hard for me to imagine Tom Hanks not winning that award. Maybe I'd have to watch that movie to know. But Tom Hanks is just gives an incredible performance, and I've never also seen Shakespeare in Love, but I can't imagine I would like it more than Saving Private Ryan. Maybe I would. So, like most modern Americans, I'm talking out of my ass without any evidence and making declarative statements. So I agree.
Well, the thing is, you would enjoy Shakespeare in Love.
Probably, yeah.
And it might be a movie you would watch more often. But
Saving Private Ryan is a hard watch. It's hard to I got to sit down and put myself through this.
It's one of the best movies ever made, and it's one that I never want to watch because it's so painful.
Yeah.
But I think that to me, it's a really important movie, and
It is.
it's so well
I agree
done.
with you.
And Shakespeare in Love, I watched it. I liked it. I'll probably never watch it again. It doesn't come back to me. It doesn't have any, it's an enjoyable movie, and it's the kind of movie you could watch again without like emotionally scarring yourself.
It's it's kind of funny because Saving Private Ryan, I feel like, has a much wider and deeper legacy than Shakespeare in Love is. Probably best known for winning the Oscar over Saving Private Ryan these days.
Yeah. Right. And and that's the thing too that time gives you. If you look back on it, I mean, people don't talk about Shakespeare in Love. People don't talk about How Green Was My Valley. Ultimately, we're going to talk about the better film. Ultimately, history will prove it right. And yes, it doesn't have the little gold statue, but that's not what those are for anyway. So, and Life is Beautiful is amazing. And Roberto Benigni should have won something for it. And so I think they were just like, all right, he gets Best Actor, Spielberg gets Best Director, and fucking Shakespeare gets Best Picture. And they probably got those in the wrong order, but
well, you're talking about Tom Sizemore, and I was thinking, I think Tom Sizemore put in an Oscar-worthy performance for a supporting actor.
No doubt.
But in 1999, it was a killer's row of people in that category. So it's hard. I mean, you had Robert Duvall, you had James Coburn, you had like a crazy lineup of people that year. But Tom Sizemore absolutely deserved a nomination for that role. I think he's kind of hard done by the fact that there's such an ensemble cast. So Ed Harris, Jeffrey Rush, Billy Bob Thornton, Robert Duvall, James Coburn. Which of them do you kick out for Tom Sizemore? Yeah, that's ridiculous. Right. That's the Yankees of acting. But I mean, I've never seen Affliction. I've never seen A Civil Action. Ed Harris is great in The Truman Show. I've never seen Shakespeare in Love. Billy Bob Thornton was great in A Simple Plan. But Tom Sizemore absolutely deserves to be in that conversation. That character is incredible.
If you guys really want to find out how much of a horrible human being that you already don't know about Harvey Weinstein, there is a book called Down and Dirty Cinema that details essentially the rise of Miramax and then how they bought all of their Oscars.
Yeah, I'm not going to
feel dirty.
Oh my God!
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to read it.
I read it. Well, I read it years ago before any of these allegations and then trials and proof of what he did to people. But I read it. I want to say it came out in like 2005 or 2006. The book did. But anyway, yeah, he's human garbage.
That one's gone through a few editions, right?
Jesus, yeah. Now with 100 extra pages.
Yeah, a couple hundred extra pages, I imagine. All right.
I just want to try to touch Gabe's heart here. I want to touch Gabe's heart here real quick. Gabe, you know what it is for me, and I think it might be for you too. We want to believe that art is pure, right? That art is something that transcends popularity contests, what money can buy, that there is not necessarily an objective, but your subjective enjoyment of art and your appreciation of how great it is. And when you feel like that's taken away from you or someone got it wrong, it hurts because you realize that it's tainted by humanity, right? It's tainted by human decisions. Right. And you just want it so purely to be art. And that's what sucks.
And decisions that weren't necessarily based on the art itself.
Yeah.
They were based on things, ancillary to the art itself, to money or to power or whatever, Yeah, it is hurtful, but the flip side of that is you also have to respect that not everybody agrees with your opinion.
Sure.
Yes. And that's fine. It's like, okay, maybe people didn't really find Saving Private Ryan as as powerful as I did, and that's okay. But I just felt like that was not the case. Something else was at play, and it just was wrong. And
yeah, but when a movie, and we this is what we talk about on this show, is that when the aesthetic criteria is so crystal clear. I mean, Das Boot is amazing on every single possible level, but it got its ass kicked. It got its ass kicked in every category by a hair's width, because Saving Private Ryan was just a little bit better, did everything a little bit better. So the score isn't going to be reflective of what we think of Das Boot, but you can't argue that Saving Private Ryan is not a better movie. I mean, it's just, it just is.
Yeah. Well, and, I think that's one of the things about our show that's a little bit, can be kind of misleading. In these cases, I think the score might be kind of lopsided between these two movies, but I don't think it really represents our true opinions of these movies. We just had to pick. We just had to, score them for the show's purposes. But both of these movies are really, really great movies, and the decisions were difficult. And I think sometimes that the end results of our scoring are a little bit misleading as to how actually close these movies were.
Well, speaking of scores,
and that's the challenge. Sorry, I was just saying, and that's the challenge we have every November when we pick shows. It's just, we want to have a good match, and it's hard because these two on paper look like they'd be really close, and they're so close, but unfortunately the score is.
Let's poke the monkey, find out who won.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Saving Private Ryan!
Yeah, it seems really lopsided, but that is not reflective of how good both of these movies are.
Yes. Exactly. Like,
and
Das Boot really, really surprised me again, because I'd only seen bits and pieces, but holy crap. Like, I am not a claustrophobic person, but that movie gave me claustrophobia. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of supports the fact that we have movies that we're just never going to do. Like, I don't think we'll ever do Casablanca. I don't know that there's anything we can put up against it. It's, they're just movies that are unparalleled, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
Yeah, tonight the worst thing about Das Boot is Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Which is just, that's the unfortunate truth.
All right. Let's move on to our recommendations. We will start with Tom first.
All right. So one of my favorite movies last year was Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans. I really loved it. And it's kind of a historical fiction look back on Steven Spielberg's life growing up in high school and how he came to learn and love making films. And of course, it was just spoke to me in ways that a lot of movies haven't recently. So there's even his first war film is in there, and it's really fun to go back and look at him do that and his first science fiction film. And then, doing movies like Saving Private Ryan, Close Encounters. So check out The Fabelmans.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Kyle.
Okay, I am going to recommend a war film, and I would guess that a couple of you have seen it. If you thought Das Boot is long, let me tell you, you need to watch Gettysburg. I love Gettysburg. I don't know if it was originally on TV. I can't remember, but I had it on VHS, and I believe it came on 3 or 4 of them because it was so damn long. Gettysburg is another one of these movies, kind of like Saving Private Ryan, where like almost every conceivable A-list actor at the time who could be in it was in it. It's got young Jeff Daniels. Like, what's that? That's crazy. It's got Robert Duvall as playing a sympathetic General Lee, which I never thought was possible. I do love me some Gettysburg. I haven't watched it in a very long time. but I must have been the only. I don't know how old I was when that came out, but for my age, I must have been the only person in the world who owned those tapes.
At that age,
at that age, like a guy 30 years older than me should have had that on VHS. But Gettysburg is my recommendation.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Gabe.
Well, I think I'm going to go with an obvious choice, and
is it Blade Runner?
Yes. No, Fight Club. Fight Club. No, it's and I don't think anyone has recommended it yet, which I find really surprising. But the HBO series Band of Brothers. I mean, it's like an extension of Saving Private Ryan. It's just really, really fantastic and just as well done and just as heartbreaking. Hard to watch, especially since you know that these people are real people. And you get to see interviews with some of the real soldiers who survived, and it's just really, really incredible. So, and I don't remember how many episodes there are, but it's a really great series from HBO.
All right, thank you, Gabe. Andrew.
Yeah, this was really hard for me because I have my my war movie list of all the movies in World War II that I try to put in order of when they happened, so that way if you ever wanted to watch a complete World War II series, and actually I have some World War I's all built into there at the same time. It was really hard for me to pick, but I wanted to do something that probably would be a little bit different. So this is a miniseries. It's 3 episodes only. It is on Amazon, and it is a story of 5 Germans who are all friends together, and it starts at the beginning of World War II, and it ends at the end of World War II. And it talks about the 5 of them in their journey. And it's from a different perspective. And one of the things that really catches everybody is at the very beginning, they're all getting ready to go to war. They're excited. And they talk about, hey, we'll see each other in a few months at Christmas. And so it's a different perspective of World War II, and it gives just a different way of looking at the war. Of these are just all just people like you and me who have lives like all of us, and so and that is Generation War is what it's called. It's 3-hour-long episodes, and it is well worth it. I highly recommend that you watch it, just because we see a lot of American-sided movies and TV series and stuff, and this is from a completely different perspective, and I think it's super powerful to be able to watch contrasting views of one of our biggest wars that is probably one of the most popular. So, Generation War.
All right, thank you, Andrew. I feel like I've recommended this before, but our list is kind of incomplete on our recommendations. But this movie gives us a different view of another member of the Axis powers during World War II. It was directed by Clint Eastwood. It stars Ken Watanabe, Kazunari Ninomaya, and I'm not even going to attempt the third one, but it is Letters from Iwo Jima. My goodness, like Clint Eastwood brought out these back-to-back films about the Battle of Iwo Jima. One was Flags of Our Fathers, which was very well done, but Letters from Iwo Jima just hits different. Like, it is the story of the Japanese side for the Battle of Iwo Jima. And it's something that you didn't know about. Like, as Americans, we are always taught, of course, our side of the history. And really, when Iwo Jima is discussed, it's usually discussed from the American side. We don't get the point of view from the Japanese Empire side. It is very well done. It makes you feel, again, the same way that you do when watching Das Boot, that these are just humans that don't want to be here, but they are trying to do their part for their country or their belief or what have you, but they are just trying to do something. And it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So check out Letters from Iwo Jima.
Read them both.
All right. You can also send all of your copies of Shakespeare in Love to Gabe Rowald. If anyone needs the address,
Yes.
you can send it to cinesmack@gmail.com. And in fact, if you rewatch Shakespeare in Love, please let us know. You can email us at cinesmack@gmail.com.
Let us know if it stacks up against Saving Private Ryan.
Yes.
We're interested.
Yes. Please leave us a review on whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us reach new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. As I said before, you can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter/X and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. If you want to listen to an unedited version of the show, you can catch us live on Twitch whenever we record an episode. And thank you to all the Twitch listeners tonight. We've had a couple of technical difficulties, but we've made it through the show. And who would have thought we would have started talking about these two very well done films and ended up talking about Shakespeare in Love? In December, we kick off our 14th year with two unconventional holiday films as Rare Exports takes on Violent Night. For Gabe, Andrew, Tom, Kyle, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
The Statue of Liberty is kaput. That's disconcerting.
I have an idea for a movie.
Oh, shit.
Shakespeare in War.
Shit, here we go.
Shakespeare in War.
I think it should be
that's fair.
Shakespeare fighting a war, but all of the dialogue is in iambic pentameter.
Oh my god!
All right, you get working on that.
How could it not win an Oscar?
Yeah, that's real. That's legitimate. That's Oscar bait right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are two things people love.
Shakespeare in War. Yeah.
Someone go to ChatGPT and say, write me a script called Shakespeare in War that is a combination between these two movies.
Yes. We'll probably start filming next week.
So I was looking back.
Week.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you look back at your life and you realize, like, man, why didn't I have a girlfriend? And that would have been because when Gettysburg came out on VHS, I would have been 11 years old watching on repeat the movie Gettysburg. So how could I not have had a girlfriend? I mean, I don't understand.
I mean, you would have had time for her in between rewinding the tapes.
Damn straight.
Yeah, you have to.
There'd be plenty of time rewinding tapes.
Well, I had my rewinder on one side so I could get back to tape 1 to the beginning to start it over by the time tape 2 was done.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. Everybody needs some variety in life. That's what I love about Chumba Casino. They know how to keep things fresh and exciting. All their games are free to play, like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire. You can claim free daily login bonuses, too. And they release new games every week. So spice things up with ChumbaCasino.com now for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.